Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Next Gen Planners podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm the head of community experience here at Next Gen Planners. And today, I'm hugely excited to be joined by a double act for the first time in a while. We've got Alexia and Margot from Juno. How are you doing today, guys?
Yeah, so well. Super excited to be on together. Good way to start the Monday morning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
I mean, we've just been talking there, and these guys have been doing morning raves over the weekend, and I'm going to let you at home Google that to see what that is. But I'm quite jealous that we're not doing that this morning. But I guess we are speaking to some wonderful people. So thank you guys very, very much for joining me. And it's always interesting we have a double act on the show because I have to split the questions between you, but you kind of always want to come in on each other's questions. So hopefully we'll be okay, and we'll see how it goes, but it's always good fun anyways. So if there's anyone in the audience who doesn't know Alexia and Margot, these guys are the incredibly inspiring founders of the app, which is called Your Juno, which I've characterized here, and please guys, correct me if I'm wrong, which is an app that mixes feminism and finance and helps women and non-binary people help to get the most out of their money. Does that sound like a fair characterization of what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on. What we're trying to do is really accelerate the closing of the gender wealth gap and sort of tackling that problem at its root, which is the massive gap that there is in financial confidence and education between men and women. And so what we're hoping to achieve is that by getting women more confident, women and non-binary people, more confident about their finances and sort of having a better education around that topic, they would participate more in wealth building opportunities like investing, crypto, property, etc. So that really is our mission. And yeah, I mean, we started that about a year ago during the pandemic when the markets came crashing down, and we're noticing that investing became such a hot topic, but the conversations were very, very different between our male friends and our female friends. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt around our female friends when they were talking about finance and investing in particular. And they were asking the sort of fundamental questions like, what is a share and what is the share market? And so that's the first time that I've really noticed that if you haven't had the luck to have a financial background through your family education or your university education, it is really complicated to find valuable information and unbiased information. And so that's when Margot and I kind of set off on the mission to create Juno. And a year in, I mean, it's going really well. So hopefully we can keep growing and we can keep educating and helping other women achieve financial success.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things I've heard you guys talk about a little bit in the past is kind of the difference between the gender pay gap and the gender wealth gap, and the fact that education can help both of those things, but it can massively help the gender wealth gap.
Exactly.
I mean, I was going to ask you how you got here, but you kind of explained it without me having to ask that question, which is good. So obviously you are building a community, which is something that obviously we love because Next Gen Planners is a community. So Margot, can you just explain to us a little bit more about the community it is that you're actually building, and the kind of stuff that you have in there and the kind of stuff that you do for these women and non-binary people in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the problem that we're trying to tackle is the fact that money is still a huge taboo, as you would know. And so it's not a topic people necessarily feel comfortable speaking about on other social media or on other communities. Mm-hmm. So we're really trying to create a space for women and non-binary people where there's no shame, no blame for not knowing enough, for earning too little, for earning too much, but actually where we can really drop that kind of moral value of money and get together and help each other figure out. Because what we found is actually some of the best information is knowledge is when others share if they've been in your experience already. So let's say we recently had someone that found out that one of their employers hadn't been contributing to their pension for a few years. And they had no idea what to do. And they asked the question in the community, and immediately there were 3 or 4 people in there who'd already been through that exact same situation and could say, this is who you need to speak to, this is what you need to do. And so we found that kind of crowdsourcing that knowledge in a space that is really safe has been incredibly valuable. And I think one thing we do as well in there is then also bring in financial experts for more what we call office hours. So you can prepare your questions and then you have the financial experts. Some of them are part of your community that come in and you can ask them your questions and they'll answer it from an expert perspective.
Brilliant. It sounds amazing. It really, really does. I think it comes back to as well a little bit what Alexia was saying before about the fact that why would anyone know this kind of stuff?
Exactly.
I mean, unless you go out there and learn it yourself, financial education in schools has started, but I think we would all agree that it's not at the level that we would want it to be. I only know about this kind of stuff because I've done qualifications to learn about it, as many financial planners have. Whereas the general public, like you said, they don't know if they're putting into a pension or not. They generally don't even know what a pension means. 4 years ago, I couldn't tell you what an ISA was or what a pension meant, and I'm assuming you guys couldn't either. So it's an incredibly important topic, is financial education, and it's something that affects everyone, but it certainly affects women more than men, and that's just a fact. That's just the way it is. But when we look at cause and effect, Alexia, what kind of research has there been research done onto the cause and effect, and why this actually is that financial education is poorer? Can I say poorer in women than it is in men?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting is that yes, financial literacy is lower amongst women almost in every country in the world. But there's a piece of research that was done, I think, last year around the unbundling of what actually is meant by financial literacy. And what they did is they asked the same exam, which is usually used to assess financial literacy, but they removed the answer of I don't know, to see if there was part of the financial literacy gap that could be attributed to a financial confidence gap. And they found that actually 33% of the financial literacy gap is due to confidence. So as soon as you remove the option of saying, I don't know, women 33% of the time actually knew the answer, but they didn't back themselves enough that they knew the answer. And so I think when we talk about a financial literacy gap, it's really a twofold problem. Yes, there is the actual knowledge gap, but there's also a massive confidence gap. And I think both of those can be attributed back to the fact that we have still to this day a sort of generational lag when it comes to finances and women's role in finances. There's been a fair few studies that have been done that have shown that financial habits are set by the age of 7. And if you think that today's working women, their financial habits were set by the age of 7, so clearly they formed it based on their parents, who are grandparents nowadays. And then you think back to the fact that women couldn't even open a bank account 70 years ago in the UK. There's really this sort of generational lag when it comes to financial confidence and education. To this day, parents still talk very differently to young boys and to young girls about money. And so with pocket money, there's actually been a study that has been done that shows that boys receive more pocket money on average than girls. So it's sort of rooted in infancy already, this problem when it comes to finances. But then I think what we can't underestimate is just how much of this is still perpetuated nowadays in the media. There was a study done by Starling, which is called Make Money Equal, that analyzed different financial articles when they were addressed at women or when they were addressed at men. And what they found is that in 90% of those articles that were for women, the language that was used around finances was about saving, budgeting, and reining it in. So really creating a feeling of scarcity. 73% of the articles for men were around investing and building wealth. So this feeling of abundance and growth. And so we internalized that over time, even unconsciously. And everything that we consume is around this idea that money is scarce. So we really need to break that pattern to start changing the wheel a little bit and accelerating the change. Yeah.
Accelerating the change is the perfect way to finish that, because I was about to ask you, when do you think, or how long do you think it will be before that lag starts to disappear? And I suppose unless we do anything about it, it's never going to disappear. We in our household, we have a very much kind of 50% view on finances, and then we could each control half and half, whereas I know that 40-50 years ago that would not have been the case. I probably would have but society would have told me that I needed to control everything. So I was going to ask you how long it would be, but accelerating it is the most important part about what we're doing now. And Margot, if I can come to you for a second, because you spoke in the last thing that you said about the fact that in the community, the example about the employee pension thing there, and about the fact that, you know, that was figured out just by the community. But what do you think the effect of more women making smarter decisions with their finances will be on the general, like, wider society? How do you think it will impact society, this kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing I want to say is that it shouldn't be our responsibility to do this. So I think right now we're speaking a lot about kind of our own individual role in educating ourselves, understanding the financial system. But really, this is just a fight against a system that has a lot of inequality. And we're not saying that women are to blame for this. And I think it's really important to differentiate that from kind of the perspective of, yeah, saying that on an individual level, we have power and we can do something about this. But the reality is that it's not our fault that we are in this position. And I think a lot of the language around women is often kind of wake up and take charge of your financial future, this very shameful language. And this is something we're really trying to avoid. In terms of kind of the effect of women making smarter money decisions, I think on an individual level, more freedom, more power. People speak a lot about the fuck off fund. And I think that's something we really resonate with. What can you do if you have that amount of money to get yourself out of any tricky situation, be it an abusive relationship or a toxic workplace? You just get that freedom to have more choices. But then I think the really important thing is also what happens to the world if women have more money. Because what we've seen is that women and non-binary people are more likely to look at ethical investing. They're more likely to give back money to philanthropic causes. So actually the whole world benefits if women have more money. So it's really something that we all need to band together to achieve.
That's interesting, because I mean, society in general, if everyone was more financially literate, would just be better. But it's really interesting to hear the perspective of how it would be if women were more financially literate, and the facts that you've just mentioned there about ethical and philosophical and all that kind of stuff. Alexia, the next question I'm going to ask sounds like a bit of a doomsday question, a doom and gloom question, but I'm hoping that you'll be quite optimistic about it. But like, based on the conversations with the people that you work with and those in the community and all the experts that you talk to as well, you mentioned before how money is such a taboo topic, and you know, we don't talk about it at the dinner table. And I'm sure there's been some research done into how many people actually talk openly about their finances with other people. I think you've been doing some surveys on this kind of stuff in the community as well, haven't you? But do you think we'll ever get to a stage where money isn't taboo to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting is that at the moment, there's a stat that says that people still prefer talking about death and sex with a stranger rather than their money situation. So we're not there yet. Yeah. But what I find fascinating is to really observe at the moment that there is a sort of, I don't know if this is a word, but a de-tabooization of lots of topics. If you think of, for example, periods and period products and just the wave that they have created over the last decade in the UK, and how suddenly now bleeding and having your period is something that the younger generation is comfortable talking about. Mm-hmm. And the branding that these companies use is very powerful and very, very raw and unfiltered. And I think this is happening in lots of different areas, specifically relating to women's issues. So I do believe that the trend hasn't yet caught up with finances, but will soon catch up with finances and sort of de-tabooing lots of different topics. But then I think what's really interesting to observe is that money is very cultural, obviously. And so I think it will depend in what country this will happen first. But what we can see in the US is that this is already happening when it comes to finances. And people are already talking a lot more about it. Specifically Gen Z sharing their financial journeys on TikTok. They're sharing their financial journeys on Instagram. And they seem to be open to removing that taboo and saying how much debt they have, where they're investing, what they're investing in. And I think this is exactly the sort of wave that Juno wants to ride as well in the UK. We want to create a community where people feel safe and feel comfortable sharing where they're at with their finances. And it will be a big battle if we were targeting older generations. But I think because our target audience is sort of younger millennial and Gen Z, I think there is room for that to happen quite soon. We are currently still leaving in the community the option to post something anonymously, and a lot of people are still using that. But I have hope that this will slowly die off over the next 5 years, and that people will start feeling comfortable sharing their financial situation publicly.
Yeah. In terms of like cause and effect of why money is taboo, would you say it's? I mean, I think we know why, isn't it? It's comparison and shame. It's comparing yourself to others and thinking, why do they have more than me? Have I done enough to earn that? And also shame of, if they have more than me, I feel shameful that I haven't got, or jealousy as well comes into it also, I suppose, a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are those the kind of things you hear from people in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think self-worth and net worth are very much correlated at the moment. And so we're trying to break that correlation between those two. But it's interesting because what I like to think of as finances is, if you compare it to weight, for example, weight used to be such a taboo, and you don't want to tell someone how much you weigh, or at least a lot of women don't want to share that. But it's also something that is sort of physically visible, so you can't necessarily hide it that well. When it comes to finances, it is similar, like it's the same number as weight. It's something that in society has a lot of value and has a lot of worth to it, and people attach a lot of emotional constraints to it, but you can hide it. And so there's this thing of sort of hiding your financial flab where you don't tell people how much you have, and you can very much disguise it, and you can get into debt to kind of keep up with a certain lifestyle. And I hope that's gonna change. But yeah, I think the first step is to break this sort of correlation between net worth and self-worth.
Yeah, definitely. There's all those things on LinkedIn and stuff, isn't there, about the pie charts of what used to contribute to self-worth, which was just salary. And now it's everything. It's your mental health, it's your freedom, it's your happiness, and all that kind of stuff as well. And not that I don't want to go down the LinkedIn route. Let's not go down that route. And this next question again kind of ties into what we were just talking about there, Margot. What have been, we in the last year since you started this community and since you started the app, what have you seen? What are some of the biggest hurdles that you've seen people facing, and women and non-binary people facing, in terms of their money and then financial empowerment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just building on that, I think the first step is really the shame. A lot of people have that approach of kind of just sticking your head in the sand and not really wanting to deal with money, because it is such an anxiety-inducing topic that you'd rather just kind of ignore it until it becomes a pressing issue. But then I think it's the wider conversation around money. It feels like we haven't yet in society really appreciated the fact that money is something you need to learn about, and getting good with money is a skill. And the same as you would learn how to drive a car or learn how to do yoga, you need to start learning how to get good with money. Yeah. So I think often people get stuck in certain narratives of, I'm bad with money, and that's just something that they see as defining themselves, but they've never really taken the time to actually get good with money. And so I think, creating that habit of learning about money. And if you think about it, it's so crazy how much time we spend working on jobs to earn money, and often, 38, 40 hours a week. But then we're not willing, and we're not in a culture where it's normalized to put in the extra 30 minutes a week to actually make that money work harder for you. So I think that first shift that is happening is seeing money as something that needs to be actively addressed. And I think, again, something that holds people back there is we see money as the kind of topic that we only address in emergencies. So the same way you'd only go see a doctor if something really hurts, people only go see financial planners or financial advisors in some sort of kind of crucial moment. So they want to buy a house, or they've just got an inheritance, or they're deep in debt. But what we're trying to do is shift the habits of looking at finances over the long term and holistically. So it's going to serve you much better if you start looking at your credit rating 10 years before you want to buy a house, and build up that habit over the long run. So I think those two habit kind of changes need to happen to really see the bigger change.
Definitely. I think one of the most powerful things that you can show to people, which is what quite a lot of financial educators do, is the difference in the end a difference at the end if you start investing 10 years earlier. So if you start investing at 25 versus 35, the difference in your saving amounts at the end, that's so powerful to show to people. And also compound interest. I showed this to a couple of my friends recently, and they'd literally never heard of what compound interest was. And I showed that, and literally they sat there and they were speechless. They couldn't actually believe what they were reading on the screen. I was like, this is just basic maths that you're reading on the screen right now. But the problem is that we just don't know about it, and we've just never been educated about that kind of stuff. And the next question, God, these questions are tying in perfectly with what you guys are saying as well, because I am going to ask you about Juno learning, which is the course that you have in the community, which is for women and non-binary people. And you say it's to become money confident, which kind of summarizes everything that you guys do, to be honest. And in there, we have financial experts. So we've got Chanel Patterson, for instance, who's in the Next Gen Planners community. We've got Ellie Austin Williams, who's helped us out loads of times before, and get on great with her. And there's a few more people that I've noticed actually as well on your videos and things who are actually in the Next Gen Planners community, and they're all financial planners and financial coaches. But Alexia, do you think that financial planners could be more active in offering courses to the wider public? Are they successful in your kind of experience?
It's really interesting when it comes to financial education, because it's one of those skills that everyone needs to have, yet no one is teaching. It's not like learning a language, for example, where it's sort of an opt-in. People can decide to choose to learn a language on Duolingo, and it's something that is an option. It is not going to be life-altering. When it comes to finances, it is life-altering, and so I think the responsibility should fall on. It's tricky who you put the responsibility on, but I think it should fall probably on schools, because that is one of the only times where everyone is forced to have a certain education. But since this is not happening, it's hard to say whose responsibility it is to educate people when it comes to finances. And so what I would see is financial planners are uniquely positioned, given their financial expertise, to share their knowledge around them. And so I would see it personally, if I was a financial planner, almost as a sort of moral obligation to share whatever I know around me, because no one else is doing it. And the problem at the moment is that if people want to learn about finance, 90% of what they will stumble upon online is written for SEO purposes or as a customer acquisition funnel. And so it's really frustrating for people that have no financial background when they type how to invest. And the first thing that comes up is an investment platform giving them a sales pitch as to why to use them. And financial planners, I guess, with their expertise would be able to break that pattern. And I know that lots of financial planners do this already. They share their knowledge on social media, they have blog posts, YouTube channels. But let's keep going with that trend, because the more people share their financial expertise, and the more people will be educated. And we all know how much of a difference it can make over a lifetime if you have financial education. Yeah,
absolutely. I think I asked that question to kind of almost restart the conversation and get, because there are a lot of financial planners, especially in the Next Gen Planners community, who get involved with there's something called PFS, My Future Finance, which is where they go into schools and they educate children, and they get financial planners to do that. There's loads of financial educators in Next Gen Planners, like who have the social accounts where they literally have no bullshit conversations about money.
Yeah,
brilliant. But the problem is that they can't see the impact that they're having. They don't. I mean, apart from people telling them that they've helped, they can't see the wider impact that they're having. So therefore, it's useful to hear from you guys that this kind of stuff does work and it is useful, and we need to all be doing it in reality, no matter. And there's something else as well called boring money.
Yes.
And those guys have started their little free consultation thing with financial planners, and where you can go in and answer questions and stuff like that. Like, that's brilliant, and that's exactly what we need. So it's good to hear that this stuff's actually working. And from the kind of people, this is directed at you, Margot, but you can both answer this question. From the people that you've been speaking with in the community, have they had any kind of exposure to financial planners? What is the kind of opinion on financial planners in the community?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is our community is quite young. And it's often an age where people haven't yet really considered using financial planners. What I would say is interesting is that we are a generation that grew up during the global financial crisis. And I think that has led to a lot of mistrust from, in general, financial institution and anyone associated with that. And it was interesting doing user testing. I remember doing one user testing where we had kind of 3 fictional experts. So one of them was an analyst at one of the big kind of investment funds. One of them was a financial planner, and one was an author and influencer. And asking people, who would you trust more for financial advice? And surprisingly, a lot of them said, the author and financial influencer, because I know that they're going to be unbiased, whereas the other ones I wouldn't necessarily trust. So I think there's something to be done there as well of rebuilding that trust. And I know that financial planners and advisors are independent, but kind of how can we break that stigma? And then the last piece I would say is, I think for a lot of people, they see it as a very male-dominated industry, one where you'll have kind of a white male in their 60s telling you how to use your money in quite a patronizing way. That doesn't make it very tempting. But I think now that we've found kind of the ambassadors for Juno and these people in your community as well, we're changing the face of what financial planning looks like. There's been so much resonance in our community with those people because they're interacting with them for the first time and realizing these are experts and these are people who are like me and understand what I'm going through. So it's been really positive.
I mean, it literally only takes one dip in the Next Gen Planners community to see that there's at least 500 financial planners in there who are those kind of people that are rebuilding that reputation again. And the ones who, I mean, we're getting as far away as we possibly can from the financial advice of the 1980s, where it used to be men in suits going around with briefcases offering you maximum insurance policies and stuff like that. And that's just not the way it is anymore nowadays. But there's still a lot of education of what financial planners actually do as well that needs to be done for the wider public as well, because they are fantastic people. So let's talk about the community a little bit more. Oh, sorry, Alexia, do you have anything to say about that last question about financial planners? Did you kind of want to come in there? Or
no, Margot, I think covered it all. Absolutely.
Good. Okay, that's good. So if we think about the people in the community then, and you've been doing this for a year now, what are some of the biggest success stories that you've had so far come out of your Juno?
That's a love that question. I think there is sort of positive success stories, I guess, if you want to call it in that way, with people building more wealth and starting to invest. I think there's 2 key things that happen in terms of building more wealth. The first one is negotiating a raise, that we see lots of, which is great because I think our community is sort of young women at the entry level stages of their career. So if they can negotiate a raise now, that will compound over their entire life. And then the second one is starting to invest. And I think especially once they start understanding compound interest, they get started with putting some money in the share market. So these are the 2 main wealth building opportunities that people are pursuing more of. But then something else that we have seen, not a lot, but a few people, and it's kind of heartbreaking, but also very, very heartwarming, is that there's been a few people that have left financially abusive relationships. And that to me it's incredible. And I think there's people that are sharing their experiences about this in our community and asking for advice from other women. And just seeing the support that they're getting from one another is really, really beautiful. And I mean, I think I'm quite passionate about the whole financial abuse topic because it is so widespread and so little spoken about. And seeing that people are taking those actions and putting themselves in better situations when they can is really powerful.
That is really, really powerful, actually. I mean, to be honest, every single thing that you just mentioned there is really powerful. And even if you could get one, even anonymous person in the community talking about their finances, that's already a massive success story. So I don't think you should underplay actually what it is that you guys are doing, because that is huge. Every single thing that's done in there is huge. As you can probably tell, I was trying to flatter you there because the next question I'm absolutely terrified of. And I hope I ask it in the right way and I don't kind of offend anyone by asking this question. I've tried to make it as neutral as I possibly can, but I am not one of the people that you're targeting with your mission. I mean, I'm not a woman and I'm not non-binary, but I would like to think that I could be considered an ally to you guys, and I can do all I can to help you out with your mission and what you're trying to do there. I understand that this kind of stuff likely needs to come from you guys, because you're the ones who have the most power in this situation and can resonate with people properly. But, and again, I really don't know how to answer this question, but it is really for men to decide how we as men are going to help you guys become more financially empowered. But Margot, what do you think, if you could, again, I'm hoping not to offend anyone with this question, what kind of things can men do at very, very high level to help you out with this conversation? Is it just being allies? Is there something else that we could potentially do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first of all, asking those questions is the first step, and that's the most important step, even at the risk of being clumsy or kind of offending people. But I think opening that conversation and not shying away from addressing this topic is the first point, I would say. And then it's looking at, I would say, Alexia spoke about this article about how the media speaks to men and women differently when it comes to money. And it's looking at the way we've all internalized those biases. Because I think, I mean, as a woman, I have internalized those biases. As men, everyone has internalized those biases. So seeing in our own language and maybe our colleagues' language, or people writing blogs or providing financial education content, how can we start unpicking that? And then I'd say it's really about listening and elevating the voices of those who are trying to drive change and who have those lived experiences. And I think for us, it's really important to highlight as well, as white women, we face privilege that Black women wouldn't face necessarily, and transgender women. And I think we don't have the answer to all those questions either. There's a lot of intersectionality that comes into it as well, but it's a question of, are we willing to ask those questions and listen to those who are living those experiences, so that hopefully we can drive change. And I think men have a huge role to play in that, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately though, it's if there is any men listening, it's up to us to figure out how we're going to do this. It's not up to you guys. You don't have to tell us how we help you. We've got to figure out how we help you ourselves, which is why I was so terrified of asking that question. But you answered it really well, Margot. Thank you. And a lot of the listeners are in the Next Gen Planners community, which is a community just like you guys, except we're full of financial planners, obviously. But in the past year since you've launched this community, it obviously is a very powerful community. So, Alexia, what do you think is actually the kind of the elements of a powerful community that make it so powerful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two main things that make a community powerful. The first one is that you feel like you are sharing some experiences with other people. So obviously Next Gen Planners, you're all financial planners and you share that. And so that is sort of something that you bond over, and it's this topic that you gather over. And with the Juno community, we want to create a community around the topic of finance and being a woman, but not just that. I think it's about segmenting it further. And so having different subgroups for people who are heavily indebted, for example, or people who are about to get into their first mortgage, or people that are about to have a baby, for example, and really making sure that there is as much shared experience between people as possible. And then the second piece of a powerful community is the possibility of being vulnerable and the possibility of sharing and feeling safe to share. And so that falls under the umbrella of moderation. I am a firm believer that a good community is a community that is highly moderated, so that there is no trolls, there's no sort of comments that can be offending, but also there's not the same question being asked 50 times a day with two people answering. I think there's this almost counterintuitive approach to community where being a bit scarce and being a bit selective with what types of comments and what discussions are being engaged in creates a more engaged community, rather than just giving it free flow to everyone to talk about whatever they want. I think for me, that's sort of the two key pillars of the successful community.
Brilliant. If I could just be selfish and add one as well, something I've heard from one of our community members recently who said the best thing that he feels about Next Gen is that he feels like nobody owns it. He feels like it belongs to everyone, which I think is also a part of a really great community, is the kind of it's the people who have the power, not the actual people who actually own. I mean, obviously Next Gen Planners is owned. I don't think anyone's surprised to know that. But it doesn't feel like it is, because everyone has the power to change it, and everyone, the voice is with the people rather than the people at the top. Really good answers. Thank you, Alexia. And if we just focus on Juno for a moment, Margot, I'm going to ask you this question, even though it was in the questions, it looked like I was going to ask Alexia this question, but I'm jumping between you both. You actually mentioned at the start where you hope to get to as an organization very briefly, but where do you want to get with this kind of stuff? How big do you want to become? What is it that you actually got planned in the future?
Completely. I think back to your questions about financial successes, I think that's our measure of success for us as an organization. If we can multiply those by 1,000, 1 million, then that's the impact we want to have. Concretely, what does that mean as an organization? I think we're starting in the UK, but we want to expand into other countries as well. Alexia and I are half French, half German, and we're seeing a huge need in those countries as well. But I think beyond that, pretty much everywhere in the world, there's a need for communities like Juno. And then I think it's really creating a space where women can turn to throughout their whole lives and know that they have this place where they'll have that kind of support if they face any kind of financial trouble, especially as their circumstances are changing. So that there's never a point where a woman feels like she's in a financial pickle and she doesn't know where to go. That is eventually the aim. I think that's quite a broad ambition, but that's how we think about Juno in the future.
Amazing. We have a saying at Next Gen, which is yes, but bigger. So, I mean, that just sounds like a completely fair, ambitious goal, to be honest. I mean, how amazing would that be if every woman, not only in the UK, and non-binary person, not only in the UK, but also around the world, had somewhere to go if they had a tricky question about money.
Yeah.
I mean, it does exist now, but it's just not wide scale, and not as many people know about it, which is good. So, really good. I'm very much on board with your ambitions there. So let's close it off a little bit. And I'm going to ask both of you guys this question. We ask everyone who comes on the podcast this question because it's really interesting to see their perspectives. We normally ask people it's specific to financial planning, but for you guys, I'm going to expand it to financial services because obviously you don't work in financial planning. So I'll ask you first, Alexia, just because we've been jumping around. What are you most excited to see happen in financial services or in finance in the next 10 years or so?
It's a really interesting question.
And she's leant forward for this question, so she's in business.
No, it's a really interesting question, and I mean, I can answer with the Juno hat and find something around the democratization and access to investing and stuff like that. But I think on a more personal level, the true answer would be what's happening with decentralized finance and the fact that cryptocurrencies are now, like you said, not belonging to anyone in power, but belonging to the people. And seeing what happens with NFTs as well, because I know there's the founder of TechCrunch just sold his apartment in, I can't remember what country it was in, using an NFT as the legal contract. And I find that fascinating. And I think there's so much in finance that could be done with NFTs and with crypto. I just love the concept of it. I mean, we're not there yet, but I think the concept is fabulous. And I think in 10 years, we'll be so far from where we are today when it comes to anything that is decentralized finance.
Juno is going to turn into a metaverse. That's happening very soon. 1.3, we're coming.
I thought we were going to mention crypto at one point on this podcast. So I was prepared for that one. And what about you? What about you, Margot?
I think a little bit more of a traditional answer. I'm really excited to see more of a move in fintech towards financial wellness rather than just focusing on kind of financial services and financial transactions. Because I think over the last decade, we've seen, yes, so many new banks and services popping up, but actually, have we really solved the problem of our kind of financial wellness? We still see to this day that finances is one of the most anxiety-inducing topics for people. Yeah. And I think financial services have a huge role to play in that. So hopefully giving people more control and understanding about what they're getting into when it comes to financial services.
I think the financial crash of 2008 actually did help a little bit with that kind of stuff, because they have to be a lot more transparent now. If you've seen the kind of growth of challenger banks over the last 5 years, that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the financial crash of 2008. Which,
completely.
I mean, if you're trying to pull silver linings out of clouds, that's probably one way to do it, isn't it?
But I think it's interesting because, for example, Habito recently did a study, and they found that 62% of those who applied to mortgages actually experience a lot of stress and anxiety during the mortgage application process, because it's still such an opaque process. So I think, again, that democratization is going to be really important to avoid those kind of situations.
I mean, even qualified mortgage advisors feel anxious when they're doing the mortgage applications. I just think that's something that's got to change, doesn't it? Yeah, that definitely has to change. Okay, so if there's anyone who is listening to this who has the scope to become involved in what you guys are doing, or if there's anyone in the Next Gen Planners community who has heard this and wants to help you guys out, what opportunities are there for them to get involved with what you guys are doing?
Oh, so many. Margot and I are not financial planners, so we are definitely not writing the educational content ourselves. And the educational content that can be found on Juno really ranges from topics like debt, budgeting, saving, emergency funds, investing, property, motherhood, retirement, and anything you can think of that touches on personal finance. And we need experts like the people in this community to help us craft this content. So if anyone's interested in helping us with that, we're definitely all ears. But then also in our community, which at the moment is on Slack, but soon will be inside the app, we love having lots of financial experts in there, because the answers that they can provide to some of our community members are oftentimes a lot more in depth and in detail than the ones that other people can provide. So definitely join our community. And if you have some 10 minutes on a Sunday to answer people's questions voluntarily, then that would mean the world to us. And if you want to get in touch with us, I think the best is to just send us an email. My email address is alexia@herjuno.com. So I'll be watching out for those emails.
I think if there is anyone listening, I mean, we all know how good it feels to help other people out, don't we? That's one of the things that human beings love. But literally answering someone's question when they are in help gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing that you've made a difference to someone's day. Even if it doesn't help you massively, it will help them massively in the future. So if there's anyone in the audience who wants that warm, fuzzy feeling, definitely drop these guys a message, because they're doing something fantastic. Margot, do you have anything to add to that one, or do you feel like Alexia answered everything?
I mean, I think there's such great crossovers between your community and what we're trying to do in terms of changing the face of finance. And so I think anyone who's part of your community is super aligned to our mission. So there's definitely scope for some cross collaboration.
Brilliant. Yeah, we love cross collaboration. And we always like to ask our guests for a book that has helped them in their careers so far. It seems kind of weird asking like my generation about books, because I personally get more from like podcasts and stuff like that. But Alexia, I'll start with you. Do you have any kind of good books that you recommend?
Yeah, I've got lots. I actually am someone who loves reading still paper books. Incredible. I think the one that I'm reading at the moment that is absolutely game-changing is called The Great CEO Within. And it's one of those books that you hear about lots. And I don't know, within the scope of 1 month, I think I heard about it 5 times. So I was like, okay, fine. The universe is telling me to read this book. And it is written by someone who coaches a lot of the tech founders in the Silicon Valley of like some of the biggest companies. And he's written a book about becoming a good CEO. As a startup founder, and it is full of gold. It is incredible.
And it doesn't just apply to CEOs. It's actually really interesting for anyone,
especially self-employed as well, or sort of a manager in a company. The Great CEO Within.
Hey, and Margot, what have you got?
I can't decide between two. I think more traditionally in terms of money, I love Laura Watley's book, Money User's Guide. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And then the book I've been recently reading is How to Split the Difference. Never Split the Difference by Chris. There we go. Which is about negotiation, and I think it applies to careers, but just life in general. There's some really interesting things in there.
There we go. We've got 3 books for the price of 1 there.
Yes.
Plenty of stuff to go off there. It's always good because the authors must love our podcast because we just get loads of recommendations for books from here and people actually buy them as well, which is good. So I think we'll finish it there because I know that you guys have got a very, very busy schedule. But I've had such good fun talking to you guys this morning. Really inspirational, really motivational. You're doing fantastic things. So please keep it up. That's all from us today. But what we like to do is give you guys the last word on the podcast to say thank you for coming on. So in this case, it's going to be the last words, plural. Can you tell our audience how to find you, how to connect with you, and if you fancy leaving us with a motivational / inspirational quote, that'll be good as well.
Oh. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for having us. And you were saying before about being an ally, and I think you're doing just that by elevating our voices and elevating the voices in the world of finance. So thank you for everything that you're doing. In terms of where you can find us, our Instagram account is called Your Juno. And my email address, I already gave it before. It's Alexia@herjuno, and that can be confusing between you and her Juno. So, and you
can download the app.
You can download the app, true, on the App Store for iOS only. It's called Your Juno.
The Android is coming in December.
Yeah.
Happy days.
And then I would say in terms of motivational quote, God, I'm not one for quotes. I would say
you're giving me the difficult piece.
Yeah.
You don't know it's impossible until you
I was going to say that one.
Go on then. What was it? Margot, do you want to say it?
It's she didn't. I can't remember it actually. You try, like, so it was. She didn't know it was impossible. She didn't know it was impossible, so she did it.
Yeah,
something
by
like
Mark
that.
Twain.
Is it Mark Twain?
Yeah, you feminized that. It definitely wasn't she at the time. But now it's she.
There we go.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on the show. It was really, really good fun talking to you. So that was Alexia and Margot from Your Juno. If you want to find out more information about them, like I said, their Instagram account is probably the best place to go. So go and check it out when you get a minute. Thank you, everyone, for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can share it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our website. And on our website, you'll find more information about the training contract, the Next Gen Planners Future Leaders program, the Blast Off program, our brand new product called Advice Stack, and our conference, which is coming up in 2022 as well. And becoming a Next Gen Planners community member, which we've had lots of conversations about on this podcast today. So go and check it out when you get a chance. That is nextgenplanners.co.uk. But thank you so much to the guys for coming on the show again. Thank you guys at home for listening as always. And we'll see you in the next one.